London, 1815. Miss Eleanor Kensington stood at the parlour window of her family's London townhouse, watching raindrops race down the glass. Each droplet represented a day of her remaining freedom, finite, fleeting, and disappearing before her eyes. "Eleanor, do stop slouching. A lady of your station must maintain perfect posture at all times." Her mother's voice cut through her reverie. "Especially now that you are to be a duchess." Eleanor straightened automatically, the whalebone corset beneath her muslin gown digging into her ribs. "Yes, Mother. The Duke of Thornfield will be calling tomorrow to formalize the arrangement. Your father has worked tirelessly to secure this match. Do try to appear grateful." Grateful. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. What was there to be grateful for? Being bartered like prized livestock to a man 3 times her age, known throughout London for his cruel temperament and iron fist. The Duke of Thornfield had buried 2 wives already. Neither had lasted more than 3 years of marriage. Marriage is a business transaction, Eleanor, her father had explained when announcing the arrangement. Love is a luxury we cannot afford. And perhaps he was right. The Kensington coffers had grown dangerously low. Her 3 younger sisters needed dowries. The estate required repairs. The Duke needed an heir, and at 49, time was running short. Eleanor had accepted this truth since girlhood. Marriage was about advantage, not affection. A woman's duty was to secure the best possible situation for her family. Romance existed only in the pages of novels, not in the ballrooms and drawing rooms of London society. As the rain continued its relentless descent, Eleanor practiced the pleasant, empty smile she would wear for the rest of her life. "He's here. The Duke of Thornfield has arrived." Eleanor's youngest sister, Beatrice, burst into the drawing room, her eyes wide with excitement. Eleanor smoothed her pale blue silk gown, patting her carefully arranged curls. Her heart hammered against her ribcage with the force of a prisoner desperate for escape. "Remember your accomplishments," her mother whispered urgently. "Mention your pianoforte, your watercolors, your French, but not your opinions," her father added firmly. "The Duke prefers obedience to wit." The drawing-room door opened, and the butler announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield, and Mr. Nicholas Thornton." Eleanor curtsied deeply as 2 gentlemen entered the room. The first was exactly as she had imagined, tall and imposing with silver-streaked hair and cold, assessing eyes that swept over her as one might appraise a horse at auction. His face remained impassive, devoid of pleasure or approval. But it was the second gentleman who caused Eleanor's carefully practiced composure to falter. Younger by at least 20 years, with warm hazel eyes and chestnut hair that curled slightly at his temples, he moved with an easy grace that contrasted sharply with the Duke's rigid bearing. "Miss Kensington," the Duke said, his voice as dry as ancient parchment. "I find your appearance satisfactory." Such high praise, Eleanor thought wryly, though her face revealed nothing but modest acceptance. "You honor me, Your Grace." "This is my younger brother, Mr. Nicholas Thornton," the Duke continued without enthusiasm. "He insisted on accompanying me today, though I cannot fathom why." The younger man stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When he took her gloved hand and bowed, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The pleasure is entirely mine, Miss Kensington." For words, spoken with such warmth that they seemed to thaw something frozen deep within her. No one had ever looked at her that way, as though she were something precious rather than profitable. "Mr. Thornton has recently returned from the continent," the Duke explained, his tone suggesting this was hardly an achievement worth mentioning. "He fancies himself a poet, though I assure you his talents are vastly overestimated by the more sentimental members of society." "You're too kind, brother," Nicholas replied, his voice laced with good-humored irony. I find that poetry helps one see the beauty in this world. And today, I am particularly inspired by what I see before me. Eleanor felt a blush warming her cheeks. The Duke cleared his throat disapprovingly. Perhaps Miss Kensington might play for us, her mother suggested hurriedly. She is quite accomplished on the pianoforte. As Eleanor took her place at the instrument, she felt Nicholas Thornton's gaze follow her. Her fingers trembled slightly upon the keys as she began a Mozart sonata. Through lowered lashes, she observed the two brothers. The Duke sat rigid, his attention wandering to the paintings on the wall, the timepiece on the mantel, anywhere but the woman who would soon become his wife. Nicholas, however, watched her with undisguised appreciation. When she reached a particularly complex passage, executing it with precision, she glanced up to find him smiling. He mouthed a single word, "Beautiful." The sonata ended, and polite applause filled the room. "Adequate," pronounced the Duke. "Though I prefer Handel." "You play with both technical skill and genuine feeling, Miss Kensington," Nicholas said, approaching the pianoforte. "A rare combination." "Thank you, sir. Though I fear your brother finds my performance merely adequate." "My brother," Nicholas replied quietly so only she could hear, "finds everything merely adequate. It is his great misfortune to be incapable of true appreciation." "And what do you appreciate, Mr. Thornton?" The question slipped out before Eleanor could stop herself. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer than propriety allowed. "Authenticity. Courage. The rare person who sees beyond the constraints of society to the truth of things." "Dangerous qualities," Eleanor murmured. "The most worthwhile things often are." The Duke's impatient cough broke their exchange. "If we have endured sufficient musical entertainment, perhaps we might discuss the marriage settlement." As the Duke led her father into the study, Nicholas lingered behind. From his coat pocket, he withdrew a small volume of poetry. "I thought you might enjoy this, Miss Kensington. Wordsworth has a way of articulating the inexpressible." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the book, sending an unexpected shiver up her arm. Opening the cover, she found an inscription, "Not all cages are visible to the eye. The most oppressive are often those we build ourselves." Eleanor looked up sharply. "A rather unconventional gift from the brother of my intended. I fear, a rather unconventional brother." His voice dropped lower. "And I would die for one smile, one genuine smile, from you, Miss Kensington." Before she could respond, he bowed and followed his brother into the study, leaving Eleanor clutching the book of poetry and wondering if the rapid beating of her heart was a warning or an awakening. The weeks that followed were a blur of wedding preparations. Modistes came and went, fabrics were selected, invitations dispatched. Eleanor moved through it all like a sleepwalker, responding when spoken to, nodding when appropriate, but never fully present. The Duke visited twice more, each time bringing his unwelcome critiques of her appearance, her conversation, her very existence. On his most recent visit, he had presented her with a heavy diamond necklace, a Thornfield heirloom that had adorned his previous wives. "It suits you," he had declared, though his eyes suggested nothing suited her entirely to his satisfaction. Nicholas accompanied his brother on each visit. While the Duke discussed settlements with her father, Nicholas would find moments, brief, stolen, precious, to speak with Eleanor. A comment about a book they had both read. A question about her thoughts on a piece of music. Small kindnesses that should have meant nothing yet somehow meant everything. It was during one such moment, while walking in the garden, that Nicholas revealed the truth. "My brother is not a kind man, Miss Kensington." His voice was heavy with concern. "His previous wives, I am aware of his reputation," Eleanor interrupted, not wishing to hear the details she had deliberately avoided. "Are you? Do you know that his first wife died after a fall down the main staircase at Thornfield Hall? That servants whispered she was fleeing his rage? Or that his second wife withered away to nothing, refusing food after he locked her in her chambers for a fortnight for speaking to another gentleman at a ball?" Eleanor stopped walking, her hands trembling. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone must." His eyes were fierce with conviction. "Because you deserve to know what awaits you. Because I cannot stand by and watch another woman sacrifice herself to his cruelty." "What choice do I have?" "My family situation, there are always choices, Eleanor." He had never used her given name before. The sound of it in his voice made her heart leap. "Difficult ones, perhaps, but they exist. Not for women in my position. We go where we are directed, like pieces on a chessboard." Nicholas took her hand, an improper gesture she should have rejected immediately. Instead, she found herself clinging to it like a lifeline. "Even chess pieces have more options than moving straight ahead into danger," he said softly. "What if there were another way?" Before she could ask what he meant, the garden gate opened, and the Duke appeared, his expression darkening at the sight of their clasped hands. "Brother," he said coldly, "I see you are entertaining Miss Kensington in my absence." Nicholas released her hand but didn't step away. "Someone must ensure your bride doesn't die of boredom before the wedding. My bride requires no entertainment beyond what I deem appropriate." The Duke's voice could have frosted glass. "Perhaps you might find occupation elsewhere. Lady Whitmore's soiree begins shortly. I believe several unmarried ladies will be in attendance, all seeking a husband without title or significant fortune." The barb struck its mark, but Nicholas merely smiled. "How thoughtful of you to concern yourself with my marital prospects. Rest assured, brother, my heart is quite fixed in its aspirations." The Duke's eyes narrowed. Fixation on the unattainable is the surest path to disappointment. The two brothers stared at each other, and in that moment, Eleanor understood that she was not merely a convenient bride, she was the latest battlefield in a war that had been raging between them for years. The night of Lady Whitmore's ball arrived, and with it, Eleanor's chance to observe the Duke in a social setting. She had been presented as his intended, paraded before society like a prized acquisition. The congratulations she received carried undercurrents of pity poorly disguised as goodwill. "How fortunate," Lady Pemberton had murmured, patting Eleanor's hand. The Duke's third wife. They do say third time's the charm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The Duke himself had abandoned her almost immediately after their arrival, preferring to discuss politics with other gentlemen. Eleanor stood with her mother, watching dancers twirl across the polished floor, when Nicholas appeared at her side. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Kensington?" he asked, his eyes bright with challenge. Her mother frowned. "I'm not certain that would be appropriate, Mr. Thornton." The Duke has shown no interest in dancing with his fiancée, Nicholas finished. Surely one country dance between future in-laws cannot cause offense. Without waiting for her mother's approval, Eleanor placed her hand in his. "I would be delighted, Mr. Thornton." As they took their places in the set, Nicholas leaned close. "You look beautiful tonight. Though perhaps a bit pale. Are you well?" "As well as can be expected for a woman about to chain herself to a monster," she replied with surprising frankness. His eyebrows rose at her candor. "So you've accepted the truth of my brother's character?" "I never doubted it. I simply chose not to dwell on what cannot be changed." The dance separated them momentarily, and when they came together again, Nicholas spoke urgently. "Meet me in the library in 10 minutes. There's something you must know." Before she could refuse, the dance ended. Nicholas bowed and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Eleanor torn between propriety and curiosity. 10 minutes later, propriety lost. The Whitmore Library was mercifully empty when Eleanor slipped inside. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating shelves of leather-bound books. "I wasn't certain you would come." Nicholas emerged from the shadows, his expression grave. "I shouldn't be here," Eleanor said, yet made no move to leave. "No, you shouldn't. Just as you shouldn't be marrying my brother." He approached slowly, stopping an arm's length away. "I've found a solution, Eleanor. A way out." Her heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "I've secured passage to America. A new life, away from his influence. Away from England entirely." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "You're suggesting I run away? Abandon my family? Destroy their reputation? They would be ruined. Not if we find another way to secure their finances." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been investigating. The Duke's insistence on this match isn't merely about an heir. He wants your father's voting proxy in Parliament. The estate itself means nothing to him." "What are you suggesting?" "I have means of my own. Not a fortune, but enough. If I were to offer your father the same sum, he would refuse," Eleanor said firmly. "This isn't merely about money. It's about connections, about elevating our family standing." Nicholas stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And what of your happiness? Does that count for nothing?" "Happiness is a luxury, Mr. Thornton. Security is a necessity." "Then secure yourself against my brother's cruelty." His passion surprised her. "Eleanor, I have watched him destroy 2 women. I cannot stand by and watch him destroy you as well. Why do you care so much what becomes of me?" In the moonlight, his face softened. "Because from the moment I saw you, I recognized something in you that called to something in me. A kindred spirit. A heart that longs for more than what society has prescribed." He took her hand gently. "I would die for one smile from you, one genuine smile that reaches your eyes and speaks of true happiness. Not the practiced curve of lips you present to the world." Eleanor's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "You speak of impossible things." "I speak of love." The word hung between them, dangerous and beautiful. "Love is a fairy tale," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Then let me tell you a story," Nicholas replied, "about a woman brave enough to choose her own ending." The library door opened with a bang. Eleanor jumped back, but not quickly enough. The Duke stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "So this is why you've been so attentive to my affairs," he said to Nicholas. "Attempting to steal what is mine. Again." "She is not yours," Nicholas replied evenly. "She is her own person, free to choose." "She has chosen," the Duke snarled. "Her father has accepted my offer. The contracts are signed." Eleanor found her voice at last. "Your Grace, please allow me to explain." "There is nothing to explain. You have proven yourself faithless before the wedding has even taken place." He turned his cold gaze upon her. "Fortunately, I am a practical man. Our arrangement will proceed as planned. However, you will not see my brother again. Ever. He leaves for America tomorrow, alone." Nicholas stepped forward. "If you think I will abandon, you will do exactly as I say," the Duke interrupted, "or I will ensure the Kensington family is utterly ruined. Not just financially, but socially. No doors will open for them. No marriages will be possible for the younger daughters." The threat hung in the air like poison. Eleanor felt sick with the realization that her selfish actions had placed her entire family at risk. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "I apologize for this indiscretion. It will not happen again." "Eleanor." "No," Nicholas began. "Please, Mr. Thornton." She couldn't meet his eyes. "Your brother is right. We have obligations that cannot be abandoned for fleeting sentiment." The Duke's smile was cold triumph. "How sensible you've become, Miss Kensington. Come, our absence has been noted. We shall return to the ballroom immediately." As she followed the Duke from the library, Eleanor glanced back once. Nicholas stood motionless, his face a mask of anguish. In that moment, she realized she had never actually believed in love, until now, when it was too late. The day before her wedding, Eleanor sat alone in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The woman who gazed back was a stranger, hollow-eyed, pale, resigned to her fate. Nicholas had departed for Southampton the morning after the ball. No messages, no farewells. Perhaps it was better this way. Clean breaks healed faster, or so she tried to convince herself. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "A letter for you, miss," the maid said, handing her a sealed envelope. "Delivered by special messenger." Eleanor's heart leaped when she recognized the handwriting. Dismissing the maid, she broke the seal with trembling fingers. "My dearest Eleanor, by the time you read this, I will be at the docks, though not bound for America as my brother believes. Some lies serve a greater truth. You spoke of choices, and the lack thereof. I refuse to accept such limitations. There is always another move on the chessboard for those brave enough to see beyond conventional patterns. If you truly wish to marry my brother, I will not stand in your way. But if your heart speaks differently, come to the Willow Grove at Pemberton Park at sunset today. I will wait until the last light fades from the sky. I offer no guarantees, no certainty except this: I love you. Not for advantage or alliance, but for the light in your eyes when you speak of books that move you, for the grace with which you bear burdens not of your choosing, for the strength that runs deeper than your apparent submission. The choice is yours, as it always should have been. Yours in hope." Nicholas. Eleanor pressed the letter to her chest, her mind racing. The Willow Grove was less than an hour's ride from London. If she left now, Eleanor? Are you ready? The Duke has sent his carriage for the final fitting of your wedding gown. Her mother's voice shattered the moment. Reality reasserted itself. Her family's future hung in the balance. The Duke's threats had not been idle. He would ruin them all if she defied him. "Coming, mother," she called, hastily hiding the letter in her desk drawer. As she followed her mother to the waiting carriage, Eleanor felt the weight of her false belief pressing down upon her. Marriage was a transaction, not a matter of the heart. She had always known this. Nicholas's words were beautiful but ultimately meaningless in a world governed by social hierarchies and financial necessities. Wasn't that so? The Thornfield dressmaker's shop was elegant and discreet, catering exclusively to the highest ranks of society. As Eleanor stood on a small platform, surrounded by mirrors, the modiste fussed with the heavy silk and lace of her wedding gown. "A trifle more fullness in the skirt, I think," the modiste muttered. "Your Grace?" The Duke, who had insisted on overseeing the final adjustments himself, nodded curtly. "The gown will suffice, though the neckline might be raised slightly. I prefer modesty in a duchess." Eleanor stared at her reflection as pins were added to raise the already conservative neckline. This would be her life, every preference, every choice, dictated by a man who viewed her as property. "Your Grace," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "Might I have a moment to speak with you privately?" The Duke raised an eyebrow but nodded to the modiste, who curtsied and withdrew along with Eleanor's mother. "What is so urgent it cannot wait until after our wedding, Miss Kensington?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I must ask you directly, why did you choose me as your bride? Surely there are women of higher rank, greater beauty, or larger fortune who would welcome your suit." The Duke's thin lips curved into something approximating a smile. "How refreshingly direct. Very well. I chose you precisely because you lack those advantages. A woman of high rank might have powerful relatives to intervene should she become dissatisfied. A great beauty might attract unwanted attention from other men. A great fortune might give her independence of thought." He stepped closer. "You, my dear, have none of these inconveniences. You need me far more than I need you." The cold calculation in his eyes confirmed everything Nicholas had tried to warn her about. "And my father's voting proxy?" she asked quietly. A flicker of surprise crossed his features. "My brother has been talking, I see. Yes, your father's influence in Parliament is useful, but secondary to my primary requirement, a biddable wife who understands her place. And if I proved less biddable than you imagined?" His eyes hardened. "Then I would be forced to teach you your place, as I did my previous wives. Though I had hoped you possessed more sense than they." In that moment, as sunlight streamed through the shop windows and caught the diamond ring he had placed on her finger, Eleanor saw with perfect clarity the cage she was willingly entering. Not just a loveless marriage, but a dangerous one. "I believe," she said slowly, "that I have been lacking in sense. But perhaps not in the way you imagine." Before he could respond, Eleanor stepped down from the platform and moved toward the dressing room. "Where are you going?" the Duke demanded. "To change into my walking dress," she replied calmly. "This fitting is concluded." "I did not dismiss you," he said, his voice dangerously low. Eleanor turned back to face him. "No, Your Grace. I am dismissing myself." The Duke's face darkened with fury. "Have you forgotten who I am? What I can do to your family?" "I have forgotten nothing." Eleanor's voice grew stronger with each word. "But I begin to wonder what society would make of a duke who threatens and abuses women. Who drives them to despair or death? What would happen if such stories were circulated among the ton? If questions were raised about the suspicious circumstances of your previous wives' deaths? No one would believe such slander from a jilted bride. Perhaps not from me alone. But your brother has evidence, does he not? Letters, servant testimonies." She was bluffing, but the flash of uncertainty in his eyes told her she had struck a nerve. "You would not dare." "I would," she said simply. "To protect myself and my family, I would dare a great deal more than you imagine." They stood facing each other, the air between them charged with the shifting balance of power. "I release you from our engagement," the Duke said finally, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "But know this, you will never make an advantageous match in London. I will see to that personally." Eleanor removed his ring and placed it on a nearby table. "I find my definition of advantageous has changed considerably, Your Grace." As she changed back into her walking dress, Eleanor felt a strange lightness. The transaction was cancelled, the business arrangement dissolved. And yet, instead of ruin, she felt liberation. Her mother was aghast when informed of the broken engagement, but Eleanor was already moving toward the shop door. "Where are you going?" her mother cried. "We must return home immediately to manage this disaster." "I have an appointment at sunset," Eleanor replied, "and I find I cannot bear to miss it." The sun was sinking toward the horizon when Eleanor's hired hackney coach reached Pemberton Park. She had told the driver to wait, uncertain what she would find, or if she would find anything at all. Perhaps Nicholas had already given up and departed. The willow grove stood at the far end of the park, a secluded spot where ancient trees bent their graceful branches toward a small stream. As Eleanor approached, her heart pounding, she saw a solitary figure seated on a stone bench, watching the water flow. Nicholas stood when he heard her footsteps on the gravel path. His face, shadowed with resignation, suddenly blazed with hope. "Eleanor," he breathed. "You came." "I almost didn't," she admitted, stopping before him. "Everything you said, about choices, about love, it seemed like beautiful nonsense in the face of practical realities. And yet, here you are." His smile was cautious, as though afraid to believe in her presence. "Here I am," she agreed. "Having broken my engagement, insulted a duke, and quite possibly ruined my family's standing in society." Nicholas's eyes widened. "You broke the engagement? How?" "My brother rarely relinquishes what he considers his. I made him realize the cost of forcing my compliance might be higher than the value of my obedience." She smiled slightly. "I may have implied you possessed evidence of his mistreatment of his previous wives." "Clever girl," he said admiringly. "Though not entirely untrue. I have been gathering such evidence for years, though never with enough confidence to use it." "Why did you wait for me?" she asked. "You could have sailed for America, started a new life without the complications I bring." Nicholas took her hands in his. "Because a life without you, no matter how uncomplicated, would be empty of everything that matters." "And what matters, Mr. Thornton?" "Truth. Courage. Love freely given and received." His gaze was steady. "The chance to wake each morning beside a woman whose smile reaches her eyes." Eleanor felt something inside her unfurl like a flower turning toward the sun. The belief that had guided her life, that marriage was merely a transaction, that love was a luxury, crumbled in the face of a simpler truth: some things were worth any price. "I have no fortune," she said softly. "No connections powerful enough to shield us from your brother's displeasure. My family may never forgive me. I have enough for us to live comfortably, if not extravagantly," he replied. "And as for your family, they love you, Eleanor. In time, they will understand you chose happiness over martyrdom." "And what of society?" "The Duke will ensure we are unwelcome in London." Nicholas smiled. "Then we shall build our own society, filled with people who value authenticity over appearance. There's a small estate in Derbyshire, nothing grand, but beautiful in its way. We could make it our home." As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the willow branches, Eleanor felt the weight of expectations, of false beliefs, of society's constraints fall away. In their place grew something new and tentative but infinitely stronger: hope. "I have spent my life believing that marriage could never be more than a practical arrangement," she confessed. "That to expect love was to invite disappointment." "And now?" Nicholas asked, his voice tender. Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and warmed them from within. "Now I begin to think that the greatest risk is not in loving, but in refusing to love for fear of what might be lost." Nicholas drew her closer. "Eleanor Kensington, I love you not for what you bring to me in terms of connection or advantage, but for who you are. Your courage, your intelligence, your heart. Will you marry me, knowing our path may not be easy but will be walked together?" In answer, Eleanor rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, her first kiss, freely given, in defiance of every rule of propriety she had ever been taught. When they parted, breathless and smiling, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "Is that a yes?" Nicholas asked, his eyes dancing with joy. "That," Eleanor replied, "is the beginning of our story." 1 year later, Eleanor stood in the garden of their Derbyshire home, watching Nicholas read poetry to a small gathering of friends. The Duke's threats had proved less devastating than feared. Society's memory was short, and the quiet dignity with which Nicholas and Eleanor conducted themselves had gradually won over all but the most rigid adherents to propriety. Her family, after initial shock and anger, had come to accept her choice. Her father, discovering the Duke's true character through subsequent scandals, had even acknowledged that she had escaped a terrible fate. As Nicholas finished reading, his eyes found hers across the garden. The smile they shared, private, genuine, full of love, was worth every sacrifice, every risk, every moment of uncertainty. Eleanor had once believed that marriage was merely a transaction, that love was a luxury she could not afford. Now she knew the truth: love was the only currency that truly mattered, and the heart's choice was the most valuable transaction of all.